Welcome to Smarter Athletes, Recovery for Athletes. If there's one thing that we can get you to take away from this presentation, it's this. We have to understand as athletes that we don't get stronger while we are training. We get stronger while we're recovering from that training. That's just a classic rule of recovery, and it's really important to understand that. In order to kind of adapt to the training stimulus that we create, we need to rest, and we need to make sure that our body is given the opportunity to come back stronger. And that doesn't necessarily happen through continuous, ongoing, non-stop stress. So let's start with recovery basics and why we should incorporate recovery into our training. The reason we're talking about recovery today is because it's a discipline of athletic training. And again, it's another underappreciated or underrated discipline. Athletes who take recovery seriously can benefit a great deal by recovering sooner and training again sooner, and it is that simple. This is classic recovery theory, and it's generally agreed upon by sports scientists and has been for a long time. What has changed, though, are the methods or the modalities of recovery, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. Recovery involves a whole bunch of stuff. Recovery is a kind of multifaceted topic, and everything on the screen that you see here and more is kind of related to recovery. So with concepts like periodization and the time management of training, getting enough sleep, making sure hydration is adequate, nutrition for pre, post, and intra-exercise are there, especially post-exercise nutrition when it comes to recovery. Getting enough rest, having enough active recovery, things like yoga, foam rolling, deloading, those are all methods of active recovery. And of course, utilizing different therapy modalities as well, whether that's massage therapy, hydrotherapy, all that kind of stuff is extremely helpful with athletes recovering from hard training sessions. So there's a lot more that could be added to this list here, but these are just some of the buzzwords that we've kind of discussed already in Smarter Athletes presentations, and if you have more to add to this list, I'd love to hear from you. We have talked about this before already as well. General adaptation syndrome is a principle that's basically designed to help people understand something called alarm phase and resistance phase, and their roles in allowing the body to adapt and kind of bounce back with new strength. So when we train our bodies quite hard over the course of a training cycle, what eventually happens is they break down, and we create this kind of shock, so to speak, and that's known as the alarm phase. And it isn't actually until we kind of bounce back or recover from that shock during the resistance phase that our body should have new levels of strength. And in fact, during that alarm phase, we should actually decrease in overall performance ability, at least slightly. The resistance phase lets us know that we're bouncing back healthfully, though, and as long as appropriate recovery is there, we are going to come back stronger than before. And once again, this is general adaptation syndrome. This has been popularized for more than half of a century now, so it's certainly not a new argument, but there's a lot more new science to it and new support for it. So when we look at classic theory like general adaptation and we combine it with new science and new modalities of recovery, we see things like this. Specifically, that top left corner image there, the ice bath becoming increasingly popular, especially in sports that involve high velocity and high volume. The bottom center there, I think that's LeBron James using a Normatec recovery system. Again, that's new science suggesting that compression using compression air is a really good way to stimulate venous return and increase blood flow to oxygen-rich blood flow to muscles that need it in the recovery phase. And in the bottom right, the compression socks kind of serving the same purpose, maybe a little bit more of a budget version of what Mr. James has on his legs there in the bottom center. So those three images, top left, bottom center, and bottom right, those are kind of the new science images. The bottom left, myofascial release, just supplementary to massage. That's kind of old theory. Massage has been around forever, and athletes have been relying on massage for myofascial release, and better rates of muscular recruitment and muscular activation in subsequent training sessions for years. Top middle is no arguments. It's a nutritional approach to recovery. In this case, we're looking at whey protein, but the image is there to kind of show that the science of nutrition in recovery plays a vital role. And it always will. And top right, there's also no arguing that hydration is absolutely crucial to recovery at an optimal rate and optimal preparedness for a subsequent training session. So when we talk about classic theory and new science, we also have to keep this word in mind, which is trends. Those three images, the ice bath, the Normatec recovery device, and the compression socks, those are very trendy things in recovery right now. And there's really no saying whether they'll still be around in the same level of popularity that they are today 10 years from now. However, these three here, I think we can firmly say that they're probably here to stay. Whether it's foam rolling or some other form of massage or athletic therapy, post-exercise and recovery-oriented nutrition, and hydration guidelines, those have been kind of proven, tried and true, and they'll definitely always be a part of recovery guidance in the sports science world. So if we continue along the lines of recovery basics here, we really want to understand these two principles. One, when we recover properly, we reduce the likelihood of injury. Injuries, especially that are chronic, caused by excessive stress and high volumes of training. And two, we respond positively to our training stimulus. So the whole point of training our bodies hard and pushing our limits during that first phase of training, putting ourselves into that alarm phase, the whole point of doing that is so that we can bounce back stronger. The reality is we can only bounce back stronger from an alarm phase if we give ourselves the recovery opportunity. Otherwise, there's another fate for us, and it's right here, the exhaustion phase. If we don't give ourselves the opportunity to recover along that resistance phase line, we're soon going to be met with what's known as exhaustion phase. Exhaustion phase could probably best be described as burnout. A lot of athletes would also call exhaustion phase overtraining, but there's a better word for overtraining, and it is under recovery. So athlete development professionals have been calling exhaustion phase overtraining syndrome for years and years and years. The reality, however, is that people with overtraining syndrome who are only training half as much as their counterparts in the elite levels aren't necessarily overtraining, are they? If someone else is able to handle 40 hours of training per week without reaching the exhaustion phase, and you are only able to handle 20, that doesn't necessarily mean that you are overtraining. We know that it is humanly and physically possible for someone else to double your training volume and double your training intensity. The problem is that person has the opportunities to recover. Unlike yourself or unlike the person you know that is overtrained or in the exhaustion phase, that person has the opportunity to recover properly. Overtraining is better described as under recovery. Exhaustion phase has a lot of other risks with it as well. Reaching a state of exhaustion often means a mental fatigue, a mental block, demotivation, depression, and irritability. These are all things that happen with exhaustion phase, and some of the biggest risks or worst case scenarios are that people quit. They decide not to continue with the sport they're involved in. They're tired of being injured, they're tired of being hurt, and they're demotivated. They don't feel like training anymore. The sad reality is that for a lot of sports in our culture, coaches, trainers, and sport organization professionals can really rely on the survival of the fittest. Because the numbers are so high and the depth of the field is so large, that we can rely on the survival of the fittest athletes to come through the systems with the best results, destined for the professional sport. Otherwise, athletes who don't necessarily make it through are the ones that are burning out and basically losing out on having a successful age group or active for life passion for the sport. They decide basically that they hate it. And this has a lot to do with the fact that they spend too many times on that exhaustion phase curve. So if we're concluding from our simple concepts or our beginner's understanding to recovery, we really want to make sure that smart recovery is integrated into our recovery routine. We have our own recovery strategies that help us speed up the process of repair and regeneration that can bring us back to a purposeful training session sooner and can keep us away from the exhaustion phase. But let's understand too what active recovery looks like. Because for us, taking advantage of a class like long-term athlete development or sport-specific fitness means integrating recovery days as well. So active recovery methods for you should involve low-intensity exercise that's designed to encourage things like mobility or stimulate process involved in recovery for you particularly. Your recovery strategy should differ significantly from your counterparts in your class if you are involved in different sports and play different positions. Structuring an active recovery routine for you should pay attention to 5 key variables, and here they are. The first is sport-specific muscle action. The second, areas of current fatigue, tension, stiffness, and soreness. The third, areas that tend to cause chronic pain, cramping. The fourth, previous injury. And the fifth, duration, intensity. That means the energy systems that are at work for you during exercise, training, and competition. When we can cover these 5 variables by addressing our active recovery routine, we have a holistic active recovery approach that's actually going to be a deliberate practice. Here's an example of an athlete in this course who designed an active recovery routine designed to last about 45 minutes. The first 15 minutes consisted of spin bike, using a build up to higher intensity to warm up muscle and stimulate blood flow. This is bringing the heart rate up above its resting rate to pump oxygen-rich blood to muscle at a higher rate than it would be if it was otherwise at rest. The value of doing this, of course, is that muscles are demanding oxygen-rich blood for recovery purposes. Now, this athlete on the spin bike is certainly not working at a level that will cause new damage, but they are working at a level that is higher than the resting heart rate, sending blood to those muscles at a higher delivery volume than it would be if that athlete was just resting. Following the spin bike activity, the athlete is using a dynamic movement prep and mobility routine, basically using deloaded resistance training. This is to encourage muscular recruitment still over the course of the recovery day, but not so much so that they would be damaging any muscle or causing any new stimulus in training. This is much better than taking a day off for the same reasons mentioned in the previous step, an elevated heart rate, and also to remind muscle of what its job is during recruitment. Lastly, this athlete is doing a foam rolling and stretching routine that's probably designed to relax muscle but keep it active, keep mobility up, and injury prevention as well, caused by high resting tension. Many injuries are very common for athletes who are failing to or neglecting to keep muscle relaxed through foam rolling and stretching routines. So here we do have like a 45-minute active recovery routine designed for one particular athlete, but certainly not for every athlete. This would be geared towards someone's areas of high resting tension, chronic injury history, and certainly sport-specific muscle actions in the middle section. So just to finalize, an active recovery routine is always designed to reflect the sport-specific needs of the individual athlete. So it does need to be designed with special consideration to that athlete's injury history, to the energy systems that that athlete uses, and other variables that might help determine the best use of the time and recovery modalities for a particular athlete.